I never thought celebrating our 10th wedding anniversary would be the moment I discovered my husband had stolen our entire life savings to give to his sister. But as I sat in that upscale restaurant, watching Marcus and Elena toast to their new business venture with champagne bought using money I had earned, I realized that sometimes the most devastating betrayals happen in the most beautiful settings. The anniversary dinner at Bella Vista had been Marcus's idea. He'd insisted we needed to celebrate properly, even booking the private dining room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city skyline. The soft jazz music and flickering candlelight created the perfect romantic atmosphere. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Yet something felt wrong from the moment we sat down. Maybe it was the way Marcus kept checking his phone, or how his sister Elena had coincidentally shown up at the same restaurant, claiming she was meeting a client. "Sarah, darling," Elena said, gliding over to our table in her designer dress, her perfectly manicured nails catching the light as she gestured. "What a surprise seeing you here. Marcus didn't mention you'd be dining at Bella Vista tonight." Marcus's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Elena, I thought your meeting was at Romano's." "Change of plans?" she replied smoothly, settling into the empty chair beside us without invitation. "My investor preferred somewhere more exclusive." I smiled politely, though Elena's presence had always made me uncomfortable. There was something about the way she looked at me, as if I were an inconvenience she was forced to tolerate. Marcus had always dismissed my concerns about his sister, claiming I was being oversensitive. "Family is everything, Sarah," he'd say whenever I tried to discuss Elena's subtle digs about my background or career choices. The waiter approached with another champagne flute, and Elena raised her glass. "Actually, this is perfect timing. Marcus and I have some wonderful news to share." My husband's face went pale. "Elena, maybe we should." "Nonsense," she interrupted, her smile sharp. "Sarah should hear about our exciting new venture. After all, she's been so supportive of your business decisions." The way she said supportive made my stomach turn. I'd always been more than supportive of Marcus's consulting business. I'd given up my position as a senior data analyst at Morrison Tech to help him build his client base, managing his books, scheduling his appointments, and handling all the administrative work that allowed him to focus on bringing in revenue. For 3 years, I'd worked behind the scenes while he took credit for our success. "What kind of venture?" I asked, keeping my voice steady despite the growing unease in my chest. Marcus cleared his throat, avoiding my eyes. "Elena's been looking into some investment opportunities. Real estate development in the downtown district." "How exciting," I replied, taking a sip of my wine. "That must require significant capital." Elena's laugh was like glass breaking. "Oh, it does. Fortunately, Marcus has been incredibly generous with his financial support. Haven't you, brother?" The word generous hung in the air like a threat. Marcus shifted uncomfortably in his seat, still not meeting my gaze. I'd been managing our finances for years, and while I knew we had healthy savings from my previous salary and the business profits, I also knew Marcus had been increasingly secretive about certain transactions. "Well," I said carefully, "I'm sure any investment decisions this significant would be something we'd discuss together first." Elena's eyebrows rose in mock surprise. "Oh, didn't Marcus tell you he's already transferred the funds? $300,000. Such a decisive man, my brother. He knows a good opportunity when he sees one." The number hit me like a physical blow. $300,000 was everything we had. My entire severance package from Morrison Tech, the emergency fund I'd built up over years of careful budgeting, and all the profits from the business I'd helped build. I set down my wine glass slowly, my hand surprisingly steady. "I see," I said quietly. "And when did this transfer take place?" Marcus finally looked at me, and I saw something in his eyes I'd never seen before, guilt mixed with defiance. "Yesterday afternoon. Sarah, I can explain." "Can you?" I interrupted, my voice still calm despite the storm building inside me. "Because I'm very interested to hear how you explain transferring our entire life savings without mentioning it to your wife." Elena leaned back in her chair, clearly enjoying the tension. Marcus was simply being practical. "Real estate waits for no one. And honestly, Sarah, what do you really contribute to these financial decisions anyway? You've been out of the workforce for 3 years. Marcus understands investment opportunities. The casual cruelty of her words was breathtaking. What did I contribute? I had single-handedly managed every aspect of Marcus's business operations, from client relations to financial planning. I had sacrificed my own career advancement to support his dreams. I had built the systems and processes that allowed his consulting firm to thrive. But as I sat there, listening to Elena dismiss my contributions while Marcus remained silent, I realized they had both forgotten something crucial about me, something that would make their celebration very short-lived. You see, before I became Marcus's supportive wife and business partner, I was Sarah Chen, senior data analyst at Morrison Tech, specializing in forensic financial investigation. My job had been tracking down corporate fraud, following money trails, and uncovering financial crimes that others missed. I had access to systems and resources that most people couldn't even imagine. More importantly, I had never fully disconnected from that world. Marcus had always seen my background as quaint, his numbers girl, who could handle his simple bookkeeping. He never understood the sophisticated skills I developed or the network of contacts I maintained in the financial investigation sector. To him, I was just the woman who balanced his checkbook and scheduled his meetings. Elena raised her glass again, to new beginnings and smart investments. Marcus reluctantly lifted his champagne, his eyes darting between Elena and me. To new opportunities. I picked up my glass, smiling serenely. To getting exactly what you deserve. As we clinked glasses, I made a mental note to call my former colleague James Morrison first thing in the morning. He'd been asking me for months when I was coming back to forensic investigation. It seemed like the perfect time to update my resume. After all, Marcus and Elena had just handed me the most interesting case of my career. The ride home from Bella Vista was suffocatingly quiet. Marcus gripped the steering wheel tighter than necessary, his knuckles white against the leather as we navigated the familiar streets of Millbrook Heights. I stared out the passenger window, watching the expensive houses blur past, each one representing the kind of financial security that Marcus had just gambled away without my knowledge. "Sarah," he finally said as we pulled into our driveway, "I know you're upset, but Elena's right about this opportunity. The downtown development project is going to triple our investment within 2 years." I unbuckled my seatbelt slowly, choosing my words carefully. "Our investment?" I wasn't aware I had agreed to invest anything. "You don't understand the real estate market," Marcus replied, his tone taking on that condescending edge I'd grown to hate. "This is about our future. Elena has connections with the planning committee, inside information about which blocks are being rezoned for commercial use. Inside information." The phrase sent alarm bells ringing in my head. During my years at Morrison Tech, inside information was usually code for something that skirted the edges of legality, if not crossed them entirely. We entered our house, a modest but comfortable 2-story home that I'd helped purchase with my Morrison Tech signing bonus 4 years ago. Marcus headed straight for his home office, claiming he needed to review some client files. I went to the kitchen, ostensibly to clean up from breakfast, but really to think. Something about Elena's behavior at dinner had been wrong. She'd been too confident, too pleased with herself. And Marcus's reaction, the guilt mixed with defiance, suggested this wasn't just about a spontaneous investment decision. This felt planned, coordinated. 20 minutes later, I heard Marcus on the phone in his office, his voice carrying through the thin walls of our house. "No, Elena, I told you we needed to ease her into this gradually," he was saying, frustration evident in his tone. Springing it on her at dinner wasn't the plan. I moved closer to the kitchen wall that adjoined his office, my heart rate quickening. "I don't care if your contact wanted the money transferred immediately," Marcus continued. "Sarah's not stupid. She's going to start asking questions, and you know how she gets when she thinks something's fishy." "How I get?" I pressed my ear closer to the wall, my hands clenched into fists. Elena's voice was faint, but audible through his speakerphone. "Marcus, you're overthinking this. What's she gonna do, call the police? It's your money to invest however you want. Legally, she has no recourse." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "It's not that simple," Marcus replied. "Half of that money came from her severance package, and she's been managing the business accounts for 3 years. She knows where every penny comes from. Then we stick to the story, Elena said firmly. Real estate investment, legitimate opportunity, your decision as head of household. If she makes trouble, we proceed with phase 2. Phase 2? My blood ran cold. I still think this is moving too fast, Marcus said. Maybe we should have waited until after. After what? After she figures out what you've been hiding from her for the past 6 months? Marcus, we talked about this. The divorce papers are already prepared. Dr. Patterson's psychiatric evaluation is scheduled for next week. Everything's in place. Divorce papers. Psychiatric evaluation. The world seemed to tilt around me as I struggled to process what I was hearing. Elena, I'm not comfortable with. With what? Taking control of your own life? Marcus, she's been manipulating you for years, making you dependent on her for every little business decision. You're a successful consultant, not her personal assistant. It's time you remembered that. I slumped against the wall, my mind racing. They weren't just stealing my money. They were planning to destroy my credibility, my mental health, and my marriage, all while making it look like I was the unstable one. The Patterson evaluation will show she's been under severe stress, Elena continued, her voice taking on a clinical tone. Paranoid thoughts about financial impropriety, accusations against family members, inability to cope with the transition from her high-powered career to domestic life. It's a textbook case of adjustment disorder with paranoid features. Dr. Patterson, I knew that name. He was a psychiatrist who'd been in the news 2 years ago for his questionable diagnostic practices in divorce proceedings. Several of his evaluations had been overturned by courts, but apparently he was still practicing. Once the court declares her mentally unfit to handle financial decisions, Elena went on, you'll have full control of all marital assets. The real estate investment will have matured by then, and we can proceed with the divorce settlement. She'll get her court-mandated portion of whatever assets remain visible, which won't be much after legal fees and medical expenses. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. And what about the business? She built most of the client relationships. The business transitions to my management company, Elena replied smoothly. I've already been in contact with your major clients, introducing myself as your new business development partner. They're very impressed with my corporate background. My legs felt weak. I slid down the wall until I was sitting on the kitchen floor, staring at the ceiling as the full scope of their betrayal became clear. This wasn't just about stealing money. This was a complete character assassination designed to leave me with nothing while they walked away with everything I'd helped build. Timeline? Marcus asked, his voice now completely businesslike. Dr. Patterson's evaluation next Thursday. I'll drive her there myself, make sure she's properly prepared for this session. The divorce filing happens the following Monday, along with the emergency motion for financial protection due to her mental state. By the end of the month, you'll be a free man with full control of your assets. Properly prepared. I shuddered thinking about what that meant. And Sarah never suspects what's really happening until it's too late, Elena concluded with satisfaction. She'll be so focused on the missing money that she won't see the bigger picture until the psychiatric evaluation. By then, anything she says will sound like paranoid delusions. The call ended, and I heard Marcus's chair creak as he presumably leaned back, probably feeling relieved that his sister had everything under control. But Elena and Marcus had made one crucial error in their calculation. They assumed I was the same trusting, supportive wife who had given up her career to help build his business. They forgot that before I became Mrs. Marcus Chen, I was Sarah Rodriguez, the forensic financial analyst who had specialized in unraveling complex fraud schemes and exposing financial conspiracies. They thought they were dealing with someone who would be blindsided by their plan. Instead, they had just given me a 7-day head start to dismantle their entire operation. I pulled out my phone and scrolled to a contact I hadn't called in 3 years. James Morrison, my former boss at Morrison Tech, now running his own private investigation firm. The game was about to change completely. James Morrison answered on the second ring, his familiar voice cutting through my panic like a lifeline. Sarah Rodriguez? Well, I'll be damned. I was wondering when you'd finally call me back. I moved quietly to the guest bedroom, the farthest point from Marcus's office, and closed the door. James, I need help. Professional help. What kind of trouble are we talking about? Taking a deep breath, I outlined everything: the stolen savings, the overheard conversation, the planned psychiatric evaluation, the divorce conspiracy. James listened without interruption, his years of experience allowing him to process complex fraud cases quickly. "Holy hell, Sarah," he said when I finished. "They're running a full-scale financial and psychological manipulation scheme. This isn't amateur hour, someone's been coaching them." Elena mentioned she has corporate background and connections with the planning committee. "I think there's more to this real estate investment than they're telling Marcus." "Probably. Listen, can you get me account numbers, transaction records, anything that shows the money trail?" I almost smiled. "James, I've been managing Marcus's books for 3 years. I have access to everything. That's my girl. Okay, here's what we're gonna do. You're going to continue playing the supportive wife, while I run a complete background check on Elena and this mysterious Dr. Patterson. In the meantime, you need to start documenting everything: conversations, financial records, any communication about this scheme. I can do that. More importantly, we need to protect you legally. Do you still have that secure storage unit from your Morrison Tech days?" The storage unit. I'd almost forgotten about it. A small, climate-controlled space I'd rented during my forensic investigation career to store sensitive case files and equipment. "Yes, but I haven't been there in 2 years." "Perfect. Tomorrow you're going to start moving copies of every important document to that unit. Bank statements, business records, property deeds, insurance policies, everything. We're going to build a fortress of evidence that even the best lawyers can't tear down." After hanging up with James, I sat in the guest bedroom for several minutes, letting the magnitude of the situation sink in. Then, my training kicked in. During my years at Morrison Tech, I'd learned that the key to unraveling financial fraud was patience, methodical documentation, and thinking 3 steps ahead of the perpetrators. I opened my laptop and began creating what James and I used to call a case file architecture, a systematic breakdown of every element of the conspiracy, every player involved, and every piece of evidence needed to prove criminal intent. First, I accessed Marcus's business banking through our shared account portal. Elena was right about one thing. Legally, as my husband, Marcus could transfer money from our joint accounts without my signature. But what she didn't know was that I had been tracking every transaction for tax purposes, creating detailed spreadsheets that showed exactly where every dollar came from and went. The transfer to Elena's account had happened at 3:47 p.m. the previous day, exactly 43 minutes after Marcus had told me he was going to visit his client downtown. I cross-referenced the timestamp with his calendar and discovered something interesting. His client meeting had been canceled that morning, but he'd never told me. I dug deeper into the account history and found something that made my hands shake. This wasn't the first transfer to Elena. Over the past 6 months, Marcus had been moving smaller amounts, $5,000 here, $10,000 there, to an account listed under ECM Consulting Services. The amounts were just small enough to avoid triggering automatic bank notifications, but large enough that they totaled nearly $50,000. Elena's initials were ECM Elena Catherine Morrison. Wait, Morrison? That couldn't be a coincidence. I grabbed my phone and called James back. "I need you to run a background check on Elena Catherine Morrison, age approximately 35, possibly connected to the Morrison family." "Sarah, Morrison is my family name. If she's using that name and running financial scams, just run the check, James. I have a feeling this goes deeper than we thought." While waiting for James to call back, I continued my investigation. I accessed Marcus's email through our shared family account and found a folder labeled Investment Opportunities that I'd never seen before. Inside were dozens of emails between Marcus and Elena, dating back 8 months. The earliest email made my stomach drop. It was from Elena to Marcus with the subject line, "Solution to your Sarah problem." "Marcus, I've been thinking about our conversation at Mom's birthday party. You're right that Sarah has become too controlling about the business finances. I found someone who specializes in helping successful men regain control of their marital assets. Dr. Patterson has an excellent track record with cases like yours. The key is establishing a pattern of erratic behavior and financial incompetence. We start slowly. Minor discrepancies in the books, missed appointments, small oversights that build a case for diminished capacity. I scrolled through months of correspondence, each email more damning than the last. They had been planning this for 8 months, carefully documenting every time I questioned a business expense or suggested a different approach to client management. They had twisted my professional competence into evidence of controlling behavior and my attention to detail into obsessive financial monitoring. But the most shocking discovery was an email from 3 weeks ago. Elena had sent Marcus a psychological profile of me, apparently compiled by Dr. Patterson, based on information Marcus had provided during what he'd told me were client dinners. Subject: Sarah Rodriguez Psychological Assessment, Preliminary. Based on our sessions, subject displays classic symptoms of adjustment disorder following career transition. Recommended approach: financial stress trigger, followed by isolation from support systems. Subject's analytical background makes her suspicious by nature, which will work in our favor during evaluation. Any accusations she makes will appear to be paranoid projections. Timeline: trigger event, major financial decision without consultation, followed by 7 to 10 days of increasing stress, then evaluation during peak emotional distress. Subject's forensic background may cause her to seek outside verification of financial records, which can be presented as evidence of paranoid behavior. They knew about my forensic background. They knew I would investigate. They were counting on it. My phone rang. James. Sarah, we have a problem. Elena Morrison is the sister of Dr. Patricia Morrison, the psychologist who was stripped of her license 2 years ago for falsifying court-ordered evaluations. She's been running financial scams using her brother-in-law's psychiatric practice as cover. Dr. Patterson is Elena's brother-in-law? Gets worse. The real estate investment she's pitching to Marcus? It's a shell company. The downtown development project is real, but ECM Consulting isn't involved in it. She's been using fake documents to convince Marks like your husband to invest in non-existent opportunities. I closed my eyes, seeing the full picture now. How many victims? At least 12 in the past 3 years. Always the same pattern. Target successful men with stay-at-home wives. Convince them their wives are mentally unstable and financially controlling. Steal the marital assets through fake investments, then disappear after the divorce is finalized. Do the wives know? The smart ones figured it out eventually, but by then their credibility was destroyed. Sarah, these people are professionals. They've perfected this scam. I looked around the guest bedroom, my temporary command center, and felt something shift inside me. Elena and Marcus thought they were dealing with a typical suburban housewife who would crumble under psychological pressure. Instead, they had chosen to target someone who had spent 5 years dismantling financial conspiracies for a living. James, I need you to contact the other victims' wives. I have an idea. What kind of idea? I opened my laptop and began typing. The kind that's going to turn Elena's own system against her. She wants to use Dr. Patterson's evaluation to prove I'm paranoid? Perfect. By the time I'm done, she's going to wish she'd never heard the name Sarah Rodriguez. Sarah, what are you planning? I smiled for the first time since dinner at Bella Vista. I'm going to give Elena exactly what she wants, a paranoid wife who's investigating financial irregularities. The only difference is, this time, the paranoid wife is going to be absolutely right about everything. The next morning, I woke up before Marcus and immediately put on the performance of my life. I made his favorite breakfast, blueberry pancakes with real maple syrup, and set the table with our good china, the wedding set his mother had given us that I'd always found too formal for everyday use. When Marcus came downstairs, he looked surprised and slightly guilty. Sarah, you didn't have to go to all this trouble. I wanted to, I said, pouring fresh orange juice into his glass. I was thinking about what Elena said last night, about the investment opportunity. Maybe I was being too reactive. His shoulders relaxed visibly. Really? I mean, I should have discussed it with you first, but... No, you were right to act quickly on a good opportunity. I sat across from him, maintaining perfect eye contact. I suppose I've been feeling a bit lost lately. Since leaving Morris in tech, I mean. Maybe I was trying to hold on to control in areas where I don't really have the expertise. Marcus practically beamed. I'm so glad you understand. Elena's right. You've been under a lot of stress with the career transition. Maybe it would help to talk to someone professional about it. Perfect. He was walking directly into the trap. Actually, I said carefully, I've been having some trouble sleeping lately. And sometimes I feel like my thoughts are racing, especially about finances. Do you think that's normal? Sweetheart, it's completely normal to feel overwhelmed. Elena mentioned she knows an excellent psychiatrist, Dr. Patterson. He specializes in helping people adjust to major life changes. I let my face show just the right amount of relief and vulnerability. That sounds wonderful. Could you ask Elena to arrange something soon? I really think I need help. After Marcus left for his office, I immediately drove to my storage unit across town. The small space still contained boxes of case files from my Morris and Tech days, along with my old surveillance equipment and forensic software. I had 72 hours to build an ironclad case before Dr. Patterson's evaluation. First, I called James with an update. He's arranging the psychiatric evaluation for Thursday, just like we expected. I'm playing the concerned, confused wife perfectly. Excellent. I've got news too. 3 of the other victims agreed to meet with you tomorrow. They're eager to help bring down Elena's operation. What about the financial trail? Even better. I traced ECM Consulting's bank routing numbers. The account Elena had Marcus transfer money to? It's connected to 6 other shell companies across 3 states. This isn't just a small-time scam. We're looking at organized fraud worth over $2 million. I spent the rest of the day systematically copying every important document, from our home office to the storage unit. Bank statements, business contracts, insurance policies, property deeds, everything that proved our true financial situation before Elena's manipulation began. That evening, Marcus came home with flowers and a bottle of wine. Elena called Dr. Patterson, he announced. He can see you Thursday at 2 o'clock. That's wonderful, I replied, accepting his kiss on the cheek. Did Elena mention anything about the investment timeline? Actually, yes. The real estate contracts need to be finalized by next week. She's been working with the developers to secure our position in the project. I nodded enthusiastically while mentally noting another lie. James had confirmed that the supposed development project was already fully funded and closed to new investors. Elena was using fake documents to create urgency. Marcus, I said hesitantly, I hope this doesn't sound paranoid, but I've been checking our bank statements and there are some transactions I don't remember. Small amounts over the past few months. Am I losing my memory? His face went pale. What kind of transactions? Transfers to something called ECM Consulting. I thought maybe they were business expenses I forgot about? Marcus's hands tightened on his wine glass. Oh, those. Yes. Elena's been helping with some administrative services for the business. I should have mentioned it. Of course, I said, smiling warmly. I'm sorry for questioning it. This is exactly what I mean about my thoughts becoming scattered lately. That night, after Marcus fell asleep, I snuck back to my laptop and sent James a detailed report of the conversation, including Marcus's obvious discomfort when confronted about the ECM transfers. Wednesday morning brought a call from Elena that I was expecting. Sarah, darling, I heard Marcus arranged for you to see Dr. Patterson tomorrow. I'm so proud of you for taking this step. Thank you, Elena. I have to admit, I'm nervous. Oh, don't be. Dr. Patterson is wonderful with cases like yours. In fact, I'd be happy to drive you to the appointment. That way you won't have to worry about directions or parking. Cases like mine. As if she'd seen dozens of women in my exact situation. That's so thoughtful, I replied. But I think I can manage the drive myself. Nonsense. You've been having those concentration issues. What if you get lost or confused? Marcus would never forgive me if something happened. I could hear the steel beneath her concern. She needed to control every aspect of the evaluation, including how I arrived and what mental state I was in. Well, if you insist, I said reluctantly. I suppose it would be helpful to have support. Perfect. I'll pick you up at 1:15. And Sarah? Don't worry about anything. Just be honest with Dr. Patterson about how you've been feeling. The stress, the confusion, the paranoid thoughts about financial matters. He's very understanding about these things. After hanging up, I immediately called James. She's driving me to the appointment. That's not good. Actually, it's perfect. I'm going to plant a recording device in your purse, completely legal since you're consenting to recording conversations you're part of. We'll capture everything Elena says during the drive, plus whatever happens in Patterson's office. And if she tries to drug me or something, Sarah, you're a trained investigator. Trust your instincts, but more importantly, trust that we've built enough evidence already to destroy their entire operation, regardless of what happens Thursday. I spent Wednesday evening appearing increasingly anxious and scattered, asking Marcus repeated questions about appointments I supposedly couldn't remember, and mentioning that I'd been having trouble balancing our checkbook. By Thursday morning, Marcus was completely convinced that I desperately needed professional help. He kissed me goodbye with genuine concern in his eyes, having no idea that in 6 hours his entire world would begin collapsing around him. As I waited for Elena to arrive, I checked the recording device hidden in my purse one final time. The next phase of my plan was about to begin, and Elena Morrison was about to discover that the confused, vulnerable woman she thought she was manipulating was actually the most dangerous opponent she'd ever faced. Elena arrived at 1:15 sharp, driving a pristine white BMW that I knew hadn't been in her driveway a month ago. She honked twice instead of coming to the door, a small detail that revealed her arrogance. In her mind, I was already broken down enough that she didn't need to maintain polite pretenses. "Ready for your appointment, dear?" she asked as I slid into the passenger seat. Her smile was perfectly calibrated, concerned sister-in-law mixed with just a hint of condescension. "I'm nervous," I admitted, clutching my purse where the recording device was hidden. "What if Dr. Patterson thinks I'm really losing my mind?" Elena reached over and patted my hand. "Sarah, sweetie, you are losing your mind. That's why we're getting you help." The casual cruelty of it took my breath away, even though I'd been expecting it. "What do you mean?" "Oh, honey," she sighed, pulling out of our driveway. "The paranoid thoughts about money, the accusations against Marcus, the way you've been checking and rechecking bank statements obsessively, these are textbook symptoms of a psychological break." I let my voice quaver. "But the transactions I found were legitimate business expenses that you've blown out of proportion because of your mental state. Sarah, do you really think Marcus would steal from you? He loves you. We both do. That's why we're trying to help." As Elena drove through downtown Millbrook, I noticed we weren't heading toward the medical district where most psychiatrists had their offices. Instead, we were heading toward the older part of town, where the buildings were converted residences and the parking was limited. "Is Dr. Patterson's office far?" I asked. "Just a few more blocks. He practices out of a beautiful old Victorian house. Very private, very discreet. He specializes in helping women who are struggling with their mental health." The way she said struggling made my skin crawl. Through the car window, I watched familiar streets give way to an area I didn't recognize. Elena turned into the driveway of a large, somewhat run-down Victorian house with peeling paint and overgrown gardens. "This doesn't look like a medical facility," I said, genuine concern creeping into my voice. "Dr. Patterson prefers a more home-like environment for his patients. He finds it less threatening for women experiencing paranoid episodes." As we walked up the front steps, I noticed there was no medical signage, no office hours posted, nothing that indicated this was a legitimate psychiatric practice. The recording device in my purse felt like my only lifeline. Dr. Patterson answered the door himself. A thin man in his 60s with kind eyes that didn't match the calculating expression I caught when he thought I wasn't looking. "Mrs. Chen, please come in. Elena has told me so much about you." The interior of the house felt more like someone's living room than a medical office. No receptionist, no waiting area with other patients, no medical certificates on the walls. Just outdated furniture and the smell of old coffee. "Elena, thank you for bringing Sarah today," Dr. Patterson said. "Why don't you wait in the kitchen while Sarah and I talk?" "Actually," Elena replied, "I was hoping to sit in on the session. Sarah's been having trouble remembering things lately, and I want to make sure she doesn't leave out any important details. Red flag. In legitimate psychiatric practice, family members weren't present during evaluations unless specifically requested by the patient. I'd prefer to speak with Dr. Patterson alone, I said quietly. Elena's mask slipped for just a moment, showing irritation before snapping back to concern. Sarah, sweetie, you're not thinking clearly. Remember how confused you were about those bank transactions? What if you forget to mention the other symptoms? What other symptoms? Dr. Patterson asked, pulling out a notepad. The insomnia, the racing thoughts, the obsessive financial checking, Elena listed. Marcus is very concerned about her paranoid accusations regarding family members. I watched Dr. Patterson write notes, realizing that Elena was essentially conducting the evaluation herself. This wasn't a psychiatric assessment. It was a performance designed to create documentation for a predetermined conclusion. Mrs. Chen, Dr. Patterson said, Elena mentioned you've been having suspicious thoughts about your husband's financial decisions. Can you tell me about that? I took a deep breath, knowing that everything I said was being recorded both by my hidden device and by Dr. Patterson for his fraudulent report. I found some transactions I didn't remember approving, transfers to Elena's company. When I asked Marcus about them, he said they were business expenses, but you didn't believe him? Dr. Patterson interrupted. I just wanted to understand. Sarah, Elena interjected, this is exactly what we've been worried about. You're questioning Marcus's judgment on matters where you don't have expertise. What kind of business background do you have, Mrs. Chen? Dr. Patterson asked. Here was my moment. I used to be a data analyst, but I haven't worked in 3 years. I see. And during that transition period, have you felt a loss of purpose or control? Sometimes, I admitted. Elena leaned forward. Dr. Patterson, Sarah's been increasingly controlling about household finances since she stopped working. Marcus thinks she's trying to compensate for feeling useless. The word useless hit like a slap. But I forced myself to appear hurt rather than angry. That's very common, Dr. Patterson nodded. When women lose their professional identity, they often become hyper-focused on domestic control as a way to maintain self-worth. For the next 30 minutes, they systematically dismantled my credibility, twisting every reasonable concern into evidence of mental instability. Elena provided context for my behavior, while Dr. Patterson took notes that would undoubtedly support a diagnosis of paranoid delusions and adjustment disorder. I think we have enough for today, Dr. Patterson finally said. Mrs. Chen, I'm going to recommend some medication to help with the anxiety and paranoid thoughts. Elena, can you make sure she takes it as prescribed? Of course, Elena replied. What about Marcus's concerns regarding financial decision-making? Based on today's session, I would strongly recommend that Mrs. Chen not be involved in any major financial decisions until her condition stabilizes. The paranoid thoughts about family members stealing money could lead to increasingly erratic behavior. As we left the house, Elena's satisfaction was obvious. See, Sarah? That wasn't so bad. Dr. Patterson is going to help you feel much better. During the drive home, Elena's phone rang. She answered on Bluetooth, apparently forgetting I was listening. Marcus! Yes, the evaluation went perfectly. Patterson agrees she's having a paranoid break triggered by loss of professional identity. No, she was completely compliant. He's writing the report tonight, and we can file the paperwork Monday morning. Yes, everything's on schedule. I stared out the window, letting Elena think she'd won, while my recording device captured every incriminating word. What Elena didn't know was that while she'd been conducting her fraudulent evaluation, James had been executing the second phase of our plan. By the time we pulled into my driveway, arrest warrants were already being prepared for Dr. Patterson, and 3 other victims of Elena's scam were providing statements to federal investigators. Elena's celebration was about to be very short-lived. Friday morning arrived with deceptive calm. Marcus had left early for what he claimed was a client breakfast, but I knew from checking his calendar that he was actually meeting with Elena and their lawyer to finalize the divorce papers. They planned to serve me on Monday, immediately after Dr. Patterson submitted his fraudulent evaluation. I dressed carefully in my most professional outfit, a navy blue suit I hadn't worn since my Morrison Tech days, and drove to the Millbrook Country Club, where the monthly Millbrook Business Association meeting was taking place. It was the perfect venue for what I had planned. The country club's dining room was filled with the town's most prominent business owners, including several of Marcus's clients and Elena's supposed connections from the planning committee. I signed in at the registration table, noting the surprised looks from people who hadn't seen me at a business function in 3 years. Sarah Chen? David Whitmore, the association president, approached with genuine warmth. I didn't know you were rejoining the association. I'm considering it, I replied, scanning the room. Elena was holding court near the coffee station, discussing her consulting services with a group of local real estate developers. She hadn't noticed me yet. We could certainly use someone with your analytical background, David continued. We've been having some concerns about fraudulent investment schemes targeting local business owners. Perfect opening. What kind of schemes? Real estate development scams. Mostly. Someone's been approaching successful businessmen with fake investment opportunities, using forged documents from legitimate development projects. I nodded sympathetically. That sounds concerning. Have you reported it to the authorities? We've been gathering evidence, but the perpetrators are sophisticated. They target men whose wives aren't involved in business decisions, making it harder to get complete financial pictures. I might be able to help with that, I said quietly. I have some experience with forensic financial analysis. Before David could respond, Elena appeared at my elbow. Sarah, what a surprise seeing you here. Her smile was razor sharp. I didn't realize you were feeling well enough for business meetings. I'm feeling much better, I replied calmly. Dr. Patterson's evaluation yesterday was very enlightening. Elena's confidence was palpable. I'm so glad. Marcus and I have been worried about you. Speaking of Marcus, I said, loud enough for the nearby group to hear. I understand he's made some significant investment decisions lately, real estate development. Elena's eyes flickered with wariness, but she maintained her composure. Marcus is very astute with investment opportunities. Unlike some people, he doesn't let emotion cloud his business judgment. The insult was delivered with Elena's characteristic sweetness, but several people in our vicinity had heard it. I saw a few eyebrows raise at her casual cruelty toward a family member. Of course, I agreed. I'm sure his investment in your consulting firm will prove very profitable. Elena's smile faltered slightly. I'm not sure what you mean. ECM Consulting Services, I clarified, pulling out my phone. The company he's been transferring money to for the past 6 months. I have all the transaction records right here. The blood drained from Elena's face. Sarah, perhaps we should discuss this privately. Why? I asked innocently. It's all legitimate business, isn't it? In fact, I'd love to hear more about the downtown development project. David here was just telling me about concerns regarding fake investment schemes. David stepped closer, his interest clearly piqued. What kind of development project? Elena's panic was becoming visible. Sarah, you're not thinking clearly. Remember what Dr. Patterson said about your paranoid thoughts? Actually, I interrupted. I recorded our entire session with Dr. Patterson yesterday. Would you like me to play it for everyone? The conversation around us had gradually stopped as people sensed drama unfolding. Elena looked trapped, her usual confidence cracking. Sarah, you're having another episode, she said desperately. Marcus warned me this might happen. You're becoming delusional about financial matters. I pulled out my phone and hit play. Elena's voice filled the air. Sarah, sweetie, you are losing your mind. That's why we're getting you help. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Elena's casual admission of my supposed mental illness, delivered with such cold calculation, shocked everyone listening. That's taken out of context, Elena stammered. I advanced the recording to Dr. Patterson's voice. I would strongly recommend that Mrs. Chen not be involved in any major financial decisions until her condition stabilizes. Then Elena's phone call with Marcus. Yes, the evaluation went perfectly. Patterson agrees she's having a paranoid break. He's writing the report tonight, and we can file the paperwork Monday morning. The silence in the room was deafening. Elena looked around at the horrified faces surrounding her, realizing that her careful facade had been completely destroyed. "This is a legal recording," she said weakly. "You can't." "Actually, I can," I replied calmly. "In our state, only one party needs to consent to recording conversations. Since I was part of all these conversations, everything you just heard is completely legal evidence." David Whitmore stepped forward, his face grim. "Ms. Morrison, I think you need to leave." "You don't understand," Elena protested. "She's mentally unstable. The psychiatric evaluation proves." "The psychiatric evaluation," I interrupted, "was conducted by Dr. Richard Patterson, who lost his license to practice psychology 2 years ago for falsifying court-ordered evaluations. He's your brother-in-law, Elena. Or should I say, Elena Catherine Morrison Patterson." The room erupted in shocked murmurs. Elena's fake identity, her fraudulent evaluation scheme, and her manipulation of Marcus were all exposed in front of Millbrook's most influential business community. "Furthermore," I continued, pulling out a folder from my purse, "ECM Consulting Services is a shell company. The downtown development project she's been using to solicit investments doesn't exist. Elena has been running a sophisticated fraud operation targeting local businessmen and their wives." Elena backed toward the exit, her composure completely shattered. "You can't prove any of this," I smiled, feeling the power of truth behind me. "Actually, I can. James Morrison from Morrison Investigations has been building a federal case against your operation for the past week. We have bank records, victim testimonies, and evidence of conspiracy spanning 3 states." As Elena fled the country club, David turned to me with newfound respect. "Sarah, would you be willing to present this information to our board? We need to warn other business owners about this scheme." I looked around the room at faces that had gone from curiosity to admiration. For 3 years, I'd been invisible in Marcus's world, dismissed as the supportive wife who'd given up her career. Now, they were seeing the real me, the forensic investigator who'd just exposed a major criminal conspiracy. "I'd be happy to help," I replied. "But first, I need to go home and have a conversation with my husband." Marcus had no idea that his world was about to collapse, and Elena had no idea that her Friday afternoon phone call to warn him would be the final piece of evidence I needed to destroy them both completely. I arrived home to find Marcus pacing frantically in our living room, his phone pressed to his ear. Through the window, I could see Elena's BMW parked haphazardly in our driveway, suggesting she'd arrived in a panic. "I don't care what she recorded," Marcus was saying into the phone. "We stick to the plan. The evaluation is legitimate, and Sarah's clearly having a breakdown if she's making wild accusations at public events." I entered quietly, setting my purse on the hall table where the recording device could capture everything. Elena was slumped in our armchair, her earlier composure replaced by barely controlled hysteria. "Marcus," she was saying, "you don't understand. She had documentation. Bank records, transaction histories. She knows about the shell companies." "What shell companies?" Marcus asked, and I could hear genuine confusion in his voice. Elena's head snapped toward him. "The ECM accounts, the fake development project. Marcus, how could you not know?" The color drained from Marcus's face as he slowly lowered his phone. "Elena, you told me ECM was your legitimate consulting business. You said the real estate investment was—" "Oh, you naive fool," Elena snarled, her mask finally slipping completely. "Did you really think we could extract $300,000 from your marriage through legitimate means?" I watched my husband's world crumble as he realized he'd been as manipulated as I had. "You lied to me? The investment, the business opportunity, none of it was real?" "Of course it wasn't real." Elena stood up, her voice rising. "The only real thing here is the plan to get you divorced from that controlling bitch and keep the money for ourselves." "Elena," Marcus whispered, sinking onto the couch. "What have we done?" That's when Elena noticed me standing in the doorway. Her face went white, then flushed with rage. "You! This is all your fault. If you'd just stayed in your lane, been the obedient little housewife, none of this would have happened." "Actually," I said calmly, stepping into the room, "this would have happened to someone else. James Morrison's investigation shows you've been running this scam for 3 years, targeting at least 12 other couples." Elena laughed bitterly. "James Morrison. Of course you'd run to your old boss the moment things got complicated. You couldn't handle this on your own." "I handled it perfectly well," I replied. "The recordings from yesterday, the evidence I presented at the Business Association meeting, the federal investigation that's about to bring down your entire operation, I orchestrated all of that." Marcus looked up at me with something approaching awe. "You knew? This whole time you knew what we were planning?" "I've known since Tuesday night, when I overheard your phone call about the psychiatric evaluation and divorce papers." Elena moved toward her purse, and I tensed, unsure what she might be planning. Instead, she pulled out her phone and started making a call. "Richard? It's Elena. We have a problem. No, a big problem. The Sarah situation has gotten out of hand. She recorded everything, and she's working with some investigator." I could hear a man's voice on the other end, but couldn't make out the words. "I don't care about the evaluation anymore," Elena continued. "We need to implement the emergency protocol." "Yes, I'm sure. Tonight." She hung up and turned to Marcus with renewed determination. "Get your laptop. We're transferring everything out of the ECM accounts right now, before the investigators can freeze them." "Elena, no," Marcus said, standing up. "This has gone too far. We need to salvage what we can and disappear." Elena cut him off. "Richard has contacts in the Cayman Islands. We can have new identities and be out of the country by tomorrow night." I realized Elena was talking about Dr. Patterson. Apparently their escape plan had been in place all along. These weren't amateur criminals. They were part of an organized operation with international connections. "You're talking about fleeing the country," Marcus said slowly. "Elena, I won't abandon my life here." "What life?" Elena snapped. "Your business clients will drop you the moment they hear about the fraud charges. Your wife just exposed you to the entire business community. Your marriage is over regardless. You have nothing left here except prison time." Marcus looked at me with desperate eyes. "Sarah, please. If I cooperate, if I help you build the case against Elena?" "Don't be pathetic," Elena interrupted. "Sarah's not going to forgive you. Look at her. She's been playing us for days, recording our conversations, building evidence against us. She wants to destroy us both." Elena's phone buzzed with a text message. She read it and smiled coldly. "Richard just sent the emergency contact information. Marcus, you have 30 minutes to decide. Come with me and start over with a new identity, or stay here and face federal fraud charges alone." "What emergency contact?" I asked, though I was afraid I already knew. Elena's smile widened. "Richard isn't just a corrupt psychiatrist, Sarah. He's part of a network that helps people disappear when local law enforcement gets too close. New identities, clean bank accounts, untraceable relocation services." My heart started racing. If Elena and Marcus disappeared into this network, all the evidence I'd gathered might not be enough to bring them to justice. Worse, they could continue their scam in another location with new identities. "The money's already gone, isn't it?" I said, understanding flooding over me. "You never intended to invest it in real estate. You've been moving it offshore all along." Elena nodded smugly. "Every transfer Marcus made to ECM went straight to untraceable accounts. The $300,000 from this week was just the final payment. We've been stealing from you in small amounts for months." Marcus buried his face in his hands. "Oh God, Sarah, I'm so sorry. I thought... Elena told me you were trying to control me, that you didn't respect my business judgment." "Save the apologies," Elena snapped. "We're leaving in 20 minutes. Get whatever you can carry and let's go." But as Elena moved toward the door, we all heard the sound of car doors slamming outside. Through the window, I could see 2 black SUVs in our driveway and several people in FBI windbreakers approaching the house. Elena's face went ashen. "How did they? The investigation was supposed to take weeks." I smiled, pulling my phone out of my purse. "I called James during my drive home from the country club. He's been coordinating with federal investigators all week. Elena, meet Special Agent Rodriguez, no relation, despite the name, and the FBI's Financial Crimes Task Force." The doorbell rang, followed by an authoritative voice. "FBI, open the door!" Elena looked frantically around the room, trapped like the predator she'd always been. Marcus remained frozen on the couch, apparently in shock. "It's over, Elena," I said quietly as the doorbell rang again. "Your network, your escape plan, your new identity, all of it. You forgot that the confused, paranoid housewife you were manipulating used to be one of the best forensic investigators in the state. As I walked to answer the door, I heard Elena whisper one last desperate threat. "This isn't over, Sarah. Even if they arrest me, there are others. The network is bigger than you think." But I was no longer afraid of Elena's threats. I was ready to face whatever came next. Special Agent Maria Rodriguez entered our living room with the confident stride of someone accustomed to high-stakes arrests. Behind her followed 3 other agents, their presence filling our modest home with an air of federal authority that made Elena's earlier threats seem suddenly hollow. "Elena Patterson, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, identity theft, and money laundering," Agent Rodriguez announced, producing handcuffs with practiced efficiency. "You have no jurisdiction here," Elena spat, but her voice lacked conviction. "This is a civil matter between family members." Agent Rodriguez smiled grimly. "When your operation crosses state lines and involves international money transfers, it becomes very much our jurisdiction. We've been tracking your network for 8 months. 8 months. That meant the FBI investigation had begun long before I discovered Elena's scheme. Someone else had been building a case against her operation. Sur loss." As Elena was being handcuffed, her phone buzzed insistently. Agent Rodriguez glanced at the screen before answering it herself. "Dr. Patterson? This is Special Agent Rodriguez, FBI. Your sister-in-law won't be able to continue your conversation. Yes, we know about the Cayman Islands accounts. No, Dr. Patterson, we'd prefer you didn't leave the country." The agent hung up and turned to me. "Mrs. Chen, we're going to need you to come to the field office for a full debriefing. Your evidence has been crucial, but we need to understand the complete timeline of Elena's activities." "Of course," I replied. "But Agent Rodriguez, Elena mentioned that this network is larger than just her and Dr. Patterson. Are there others we should be concerned about?" The agent's expression darkened. "Mrs. Chen, what I'm about to tell you doesn't leave this room until we've made more arrests. Elena Patterson isn't the head of this operation. She's middle management." Marcus, who had been sitting in stunned silence, looked up sharply. "What do you mean?" "We've been investigating a sophisticated fraud network that targets affluent suburban couples across the eastern seaboard. They identify successful men with stay-at-home wives, then use psychological manipulation and fraudulent psychiatric evaluations to steal marital assets. Elena's operation in Millbrook is just one of 12 similar schemes running simultaneously." I felt a chill run down my spine. "How many victims?" "Over 200 couples in the past 5 years. The total estimated losses exceed $15 million. The scope was staggering. Elena's casual mention of 12 previous victims in our area was just the tip of an iceberg. "But here's what concerns us most," Agent Rodriguez continued. "The network has been escalating their methods. 3 wives who tried to expose the scheme in other cities have died in apparent accidents. Car crashes, home invasions, medication overdoses, all ruled accidental or natural causes, but the pattern is troubling." Marcus went white. "Are you saying Sarah could be in danger?" "We're saying Sarah has already been targeted for elimination." Agent Rodriguez pulled out her phone and showed me a series of text messages. "We intercepted these communications from Dr. Patterson's phone this morning. Elena was instructed to proceed with permanent solution protocols if the psychiatric evaluation failed to control you." I read the messages with growing horror. "Subject becoming problematic. Recommend immediate implementation of Protocol 7. Understood. Vehicle accident staged for Saturday evening. Make it look like stress-related poor judgment. Timing critical. Must occur before federal involvement confirmed." "They were planning to kill me tomorrow night," I whispered. "We believe so, yes." Elena's panic call to Dr. Patterson this afternoon accelerated their timeline. They're moving to eliminate loose ends before fleeing the country. Elena, now seated in handcuffs on our couch, smirked despite her situation. "You have no idea what you've gotten yourself into, Sarah. Robert doesn't like loose ends, and you've created a very big loose end." "Robert?" Agent Rodriguez asked sharply. Elena's smirk widened. "Dr. Patterson's real name is Robert Morrison. He's James Morrison's brother." The room went silent. My ally, the man who'd been helping me build the case against Elena, was the brother of one of the key conspirators. "That's impossible," I said. "James has been helping me expose this scheme. He's the one who convinced you to gather evidence in a specific way. Elena interrupted. Who suggested you play along with the psychiatric evaluation? Who told you exactly what evidence to collect and how to present it? Agent Rodriguez was already on her phone, speaking in urgent, clipped tones. When she hung up, her face was grim. Mrs. Chen, we need to get you to a secure location immediately. James Morrison hasn't been helping you build a case against Elena. He's been monitoring your investigation to stay ahead of it. The betrayal hit me like a physical blow. Every piece of evidence I'd shared with James, every strategy we'd discussed, every move I'd planned, all of it had been reported back to the network. But the other victims, I protested. The women James said would help testify. Were fiction, Elena said, clearly enjoying my shock. James fed you false information to make you feel supported while we monitored your actual capabilities. We needed to know how dangerous you really were. Marcus stood up abruptly. Sarah, I'm sorry. I had no idea. Mr. Chan, Agent Rodriguez interrupted, you're also under arrest as an accessory to fraud. The fact that you were manipulated doesn't excuse your participation in transferring stolen funds. As a second agent approached Marcus with handcuffs, he turned to me with desperate eyes. Sarah, please. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I never wanted anyone to get hurt. The road to hell, I replied quietly, is paved with good intentions and willful ignorance. Elena laughed as she was escorted toward the door. Oh, Sarah, you still don't understand. James isn't just monitoring you. He's been in love with you for years. That's what makes this so delicious. He's going to be very sorry he has to kill you. Agent Rodriguez placed a protective hand on my shoulder. Mrs. Chen, we're taking you into federal protective custody immediately. James Morrison is no longer just a person of interest. He's a suspect in multiple homicides, and he knows exactly where you are. As I gathered essential items for an indefinite stay in protective custody, my phone rang. James Morrison's name appeared on the screen. Agent Rodriguez gestured for me to answer while she activated a trace. Sarah, James's familiar voice said, though now it sounded different. Colder, more calculating. I heard there was some excitement at your house today. I think it's time we had an honest conversation about your situation. I think we've said everything we need to say, James. Actually, we haven't. You see, Sarah, you've created a very expensive problem for my organization. Elena was sloppy, but she was profitable. Now we need to decide whether you're going to quietly disappear, or whether we need to make your disappearance look like another tragic accident. Agent Rodriguez was frantically signaling to agents outside, trying to coordinate a trace on James's location. I'm not afraid of you, James, I said, surprised by the steadiness in my own voice. You should be, he replied, because unlike Elena, I know exactly how intelligent you are. And unlike Dr. Patterson, I know that you won't stop until you've exposed every aspect of our operation. That makes you the most dangerous person we've ever encountered. The line went dead, and Agent Rodriguez immediately ushered me toward the door. We need to move now. James Morrison is a ghost. He's been operating under false identities for years, and he has resources we're still mapping. As we left my house, possibly for the last time, I realized that everything I thought I knew about my situation had been wrong. Elena had been a puppet. Dr. Patterson had been a tool. The real enemy was someone who had been pretending to be my salvation. And now he was coming for me. Chael. The FBI's safe house was a nondescript suburban home 30 miles outside Millbrook, complete with surveillance equipment disguised as everyday electronics and agents posing as neighbors. For 3 days, I'd been living in this strange limbo, watching the news coverage of Elena's arrest while knowing that the real architect of the conspiracy remained free. Agent Rodriguez had briefed me on James Morrison's background, or rather, the fragments they'd been able to piece together. Born Robert James Morrison, he'd started as a legitimate financial investigator before gradually transitioning into organized fraud. His brother Richard had provided the psychological evaluation component, while James handled recruitment and money laundering. We've traced his activities back 15 years, Agent Rodriguez explained during our morning briefing. The suburban marriage fraud was just his latest innovation. Before that, he ran insurance scams, elder fraud, and corporate embezzlement schemes. But why target me specifically, I asked. There are easier marks than a former forensic investigator. That's exactly why he chose you. James is a narcissist who believes he's smarter than law enforcement. Manipulating someone with your background was the ultimate challenge. He wanted to prove he could fool a professional investigator into helping him cover his own tracks. My phone rang. A burner phone the FBI had given me for secure communications. Only Agent Rodriguez and 2 other agents had the number. Sarah, James's voice came through clearly. I know you're in protective custody, but I think it's time we met face to face. Agent Rodriguez immediately began tracing the call while gesturing for me to keep him talking. I don't think that's a good idea, James. Oh, but I do. You see, I have something that belongs to you. Or rather, someone. My blood ran cold. What do you mean? Marcus didn't stay in federal custody as long as everyone thought. Amazing what a few forged transfer documents can accomplish. He's with me now, and he's very eager to apologize for his role in this unfortunate situation. I could hear muffled sounds in the background, someone trying to speak through what sounded like tape over their mouth. If you hurt him, I won't hurt him, Sarah. In fact, I'll trade him for you. Straight swap. You come alone to the location I'm about to text you, and Marcus goes free. Sarah, don't, Agent Rodriguez whispered urgently. It's a trap. Of course it's a trap, James continued, apparently having heard her. But it's a trap where your husband lives if you cooperate, and dies if you don't. Your choice. The text message came through with an address I recognized, the old Morrison Tech building where I'd worked before meeting Marcus. The irony wasn't lost on me. 1 hour, Sarah. Come alone, no wire, no backup. I'll know if you're not alone. The line went dead. Agent Rodriguez was already coordinating with her team. We can have snipers in position, surveillance drones, the full tactical response. He said no backup. Sarah, you're not seriously considering this. I looked out the window at the peaceful suburban street, thinking about Marcus sitting somewhere with tape over his mouth, paying the price for his willingness to trust the wrong person. Despite everything he'd done, despite the betrayal and the lies, he didn't deserve to die for Elena's manipulation. I'm going, I said quietly. It's suicide. Maybe. But it's also the only way to end this. I stood up, my mind already working through the possibilities. Agent Rodriguez. James Morrison has been playing chess while everyone else was playing checkers. He's always 3 moves ahead because he controls the information flow. What are you thinking? I smiled, feeling that familiar calm that had always come over me when solving complex fraud cases. I'm thinking it's time someone changed the game entirely. 20 minutes later, I was driving toward my old office building, carrying evidence that could destroy James Morrison's entire network. But more importantly, I was carrying something he didn't know I had. The real recordings from Dr. Patterson's office, the ones that proved James had been planning this confrontation from the very beginning. Elena and Marcus had been pawns. Dr. Patterson had been a tool. Even Agent Rodriguez and the FBI investigation had been anticipated and planned for. But James Morrison had made one crucial error in his calculations. He assumed that because he'd manipulated me through the investigation, he understood how I thought and what I was capable of. He was about to discover that understanding someone's professional methodology and truly knowing their character were 2 very different things. As I pulled into the empty parking lot of Morrison Tech, I could see a figure waiting in the lobby of the building where my career had begun. It seemed fitting that this was where it would all end, one way or another. The Morrison Tech building looked exactly as I remembered it, glass and steel reaching toward the sky, representing everything I'd accomplished before I'd given it all up to support Marcus's dreams. As I walked through the familiar lobby, my footsteps echoed against the marble floors where I'd once felt so confident and capable. James was waiting by the elevator, impeccably dressed as always, but now I could see the calculation behind his warm smile. Marcus sat in a chair nearby, duct tape over his mouth but his eyes alert and apologetic. Sarah, James said warmly, as if we were meeting for coffee instead of a hostage exchange. You look well, considering the circumstances. Let him go, James. I'm here. In a moment. First, I want you to understand something. He gestured toward the building around us. Do you know why I chose this location? I remained silent, watching for any sign of his next move. This building represents everything you gave up when you married Marcus. Your career, your independence, your identity as a forensic investigator. You became Sarah Chen, the supportive wife, and buried Sarah Rodriguez, the woman who could have been my equal. Your equal? James smiled, and for a moment I saw genuine admiration in his eyes. Sarah, you're the most naturally gifted investigator I've ever encountered. The way you unraveled Elena's scheme, the methodical evidence gathering, the strategic thinking, it was beautiful to watch. You watched me destroy your operation and you're complimenting my technique? I watched you operate at maybe 30% of your actual capability, handicapped by emotional investment and a desire to save a marriage that was already over. James walked closer, his voice taking on an almost seductive quality. Imagine what you could accomplish without those limitations. I understood then what he was really offering. You want me to join you. Elena was careless and greedy. Marcus was weak and easily manipulated. Dr. Patterson was useful but unimaginative. James stopped directly in front of me. But you could help me build something unprecedented. A fraud network so sophisticated that law enforcement wouldn't even recognize it as criminal activity. And if I refuse? Then you and Marcus both disappear, and I find someone else with your skill set but less inconvenient moral constraints. I looked at Marcus, seeing the fear in his eyes but also something else. Resignation. He knew he'd destroyed our marriage through his weakness and greed. He was prepared to pay the price for that. James, I said carefully, before I answer, I need to understand something. When did this really start? The recruitment, the targeting of our marriage. How long have you been planning this? His smile widened with pride. Since the day you left Morrison Tech. I knew eventually you'd become restless playing house with Marcus. I just needed to create the right circumstances to bring you back into the game. The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. You orchestrated all of it. Elena approaching Marcus, the investment scheme, even my discovery of their plan. You wanted me to investigate. I needed to see how sharp your skills remained after 3 years of domestic life. The answer is very sharp indeed. But why such an elaborate test? Why not just offer me a job? James laughed. Sarah, you would never have joined a criminal organization willingly. But if your husband betrayed you, if your marriage was destroyed, if you were facing a choice between poverty and using your skills for morally flexible purposes, well, that changes the equation entirely. I felt a cold fury building inside me. You destroyed my marriage as a recruitment strategy. I liberated you from a marriage that was already dying. Marcus never appreciated what he had. He saw you as an accessory to his success, not as an equal partner. And you see me as what? A business asset? I see you as the most dangerous woman in America when properly motivated. James's eyes gleamed with something approaching obsession. Together, we could steal hundreds of millions. We could build an empire that law enforcement couldn't touch because they wouldn't even understand how it worked. I looked around the building where my legitimate career had flourished, thinking about the choice James was offering. He was right about Marcus. Our marriage had been built on his need for support rather than genuine partnership. He was right about my capabilities. I had been operating below my potential for years. But he was wrong about one crucial thing. James, I said quietly, you're absolutely right that I'm dangerous when properly motivated. His smile widened in anticipation of victory. The problem is, I continued, you just gave me the best motivation I've ever had to destroy you completely. I pulled out my phone and hit a preset number. Agent Rodriguez, he confessed to everything. You got all of that, right? James's face went white as he realized that our entire conversation had been broadcast live to the FBI tactical team positioned around the building. The elevator doors opened, and Agent Rodriguez stepped out with 6 armed agents behind her. James Morrison, she announced, you're under arrest for conspiracy, kidnapping, and about a dozen other federal charges we'll figure out later. As James was being handcuffed, he looked at me with something approaching respect. Well played, Sarah. I underestimated your commitment to conventional morality. No, I replied, watching Marcus being freed from his restraints. You underestimated my commitment to justice. There's a difference. 3 weeks later, I sat in Agent Rodriguez's office, reviewing the final case files of what the media had dubbed the marriage fraud network. The scope of James Morrison's operation was even more extensive than anyone had initially realized. 47 arrests across 12 states, Agent Rodriguez reported, sliding a thick folder across her desk. James's confession led us to operations in cities we hadn't even suspected. The network had been growing exponentially. I opened the folder to find photographs and profiles of the real victims, not the fictional ones James had described to me, but actual women whose lives had been destroyed by the scheme. Teachers, nurses, accountants, small business owners, all of them had trusted their husbands' financial decisions until it was too late. What about restitution for the victims? We've recovered about 60% of the stolen funds from offshore accounts. It's not complete justice, but it's more than most fraud victims ever see. I nodded, thinking about the women in those photographs who would rebuild their lives with whatever recovery was possible. And Elena? Cooperating fully in exchange for a reduced sentence. Turns out she was as much a victim of James's manipulation as anyone else. He recruited her 5 years ago after she went through her own messy divorce. The pattern was always the same. James identified vulnerable people, exploited their weaknesses, and turned them into accomplices who felt they had no choice but to continue. Elena's cruelty toward me had been born from her own desperation and James's psychological conditioning. Dr. Patterson? Richard Morrison is looking at 25 years minimum. He was the architect of the psychiatric evaluation component, and we found evidence linking him to at least 3 suspicious deaths in other cities. Agent Rodriguez leaned back in her chair, studying my face. Sarah, I have to ask, what are you planning to do now? The Bureau could use someone with your skills in our financial crimes division. I'd been expecting this conversation. Over the past 3 weeks, I'd been consulting on the Morrison investigation, helping federal agents understand the psychological and technical aspects of the fraud network. It felt like coming home to my professional identity. I've been thinking about that, I replied, but I have some conditions. Name them. I want to head a task force specifically focused on marriage and domestic fraud schemes. These crimes target women in vulnerable positions, and I think we need investigators who understand that dynamic. Agent Rodriguez smiled. Done. What else? Full autonomy to recruit and train agents who have personal experience with financial manipulation. Sometimes the best investigators are the ones who've been victims themselves. Agreed. Anything else? I thought about Marcus, who was currently staying with his sister in Ohio while we worked through divorce proceedings. Despite everything, our final conversations had been civil, even sad. He was attending therapy and had volunteered to testify against other members of James's network. I want guarantees that victim witnesses in similar cases receive full psychological support and protection. What James did to these families, the psychological manipulation, the systematic destruction of trust, it leaves scars that go beyond financial loss. Sarah, Agent Rodriguez said quietly, you do realize you're describing exactly what happened to you? I looked out her office window at the busy federal building, watching agents and investigators going about their work. For 3 years, I'd felt like I was living in someone else's life, supporting someone else's dreams, being someone else's version of who I should be. Yes, I said finally. I'm describing what happened to me, but I'm also describing what won't happen to anyone else if I can help it. Agent Rodriguez extended her hand across the desk. Welcome back to law enforcement, Special Agent Rodriguez. I shook her hand, feeling the weight of my new badge in my jacket pocket. Sarah Chen, the supportive wife who'd given up her career, was officially retired. Sarah Rodriguez, federal investigator specializing in organized domestic fraud, was ready to begin. The first case file was already waiting on my new desk, a woman in Denver whose husband had suddenly started making mysterious investments in his brother's consulting firm. Some patterns, I thought grimly, never change. But now I was in a position to break them. 1 year later, I stood before a conference room filled with law enforcement officials from across the country, delivering the closing presentation of the first National Domestic Financial Fraud Summit. The Rodriguez Task Force had just completed its most successful year, dismantling 8 organized fraud networks and recovering over $40 million for victims. The key to understanding domestic financial fraud, I explained to the attentive audience, is recognizing that it's not just about money. It's about systematically destroying a person's sense of reality, their trust in their own judgment, and their belief in their own worth. In the front row sat Detective Maria Santos from Denver, whose investigation had been our first joint operation. Beside her was Dr. Patricia Williams, a legitimate psychiatrist who now helped us identify and counteract fraudulent psychological evaluations. The team I'd built was comprised of professionals who understood that fighting this type of crime required both technical expertise and personal experience with manipulation. After the presentation, I returned to my office, a spacious corner room with windows overlooking the Potomac. On my desk sat a letter from Marcus, now living in Colorado and working as a junior accountant for a legitimate firm. He was still in therapy and had testified in 6 federal cases against former members of James's network. Our divorce had been finalized 8 months ago, amicable and final. The letter was brief. "Sarah, I saw the news coverage of your presentation. I'm proud of what you've built, and I hope you know how sorry I remain for my part in almost destroying you. You deserved a partner who appreciated your strength, not one who tried to diminish it. Marcus." I folded the letter and placed it in my desk drawer with the others. Forgiveness was a process, but understanding was complete. Marcus had been a victim too, albeit a willing one who'd chosen the easier path of acceptance over the harder one of questioning. My phone buzzed with a text from Agent Rodriguez, "New case in Seattle. Husband transferred retirement funds to sister's, quote, medical research company." Sound familiar? I smiled, grabbing my jacket and badge. 3 years ago, I would have been the victim in a similar case, confused and betrayed, wondering how someone I trusted could steal from me. Now I was the person other victims called when they needed someone who understood their situation completely. The Seattle case would be solved within a week. The victims would recover their money. The perpetrators would face federal charges. Most importantly, another woman would learn that being manipulated didn't make her weak. It made her dangerous to the people who preyed on others. I walked through the federal building toward the parking garage, thinking about the trajectory that had brought me from Sarah Chen, supportive wife, to Special Agent Sarah Rodriguez, head of the Domestic Financial Fraud Task Force. The transformation hadn't begun with James Morrison's arrest, or Elena's exposure, or even Marcus's betrayal. It had begun the moment I decided to stop accepting other people's definitions of who I was supposed to be. My phone rang as I reached my car. "Rodriguez. Agent Rodriguez? This is Detective Thompson in Portland. We have a situation here that matches your task force profile exactly. Husband claiming his wife is having paranoid delusions about missing money. Psychiatric evaluation scheduled for tomorrow." "I'll be on the next flight," I said, already calculating travel time and evidence requirements. "And Detective Thompson, make sure someone stays with the wife tonight. These people escalate quickly when they feel threatened." As I drove toward the airport, I thought about the woman in Portland who was probably sitting in her house right now, wondering if she was really losing her mind, or if something terrible was happening to her family's finances. Tomorrow she would learn that her instincts were right, that her husband's dismissive explanations were lies, and that she was stronger than anyone, including herself, had ever imagined. The game had changed completely. Now I was the one who was always 3 moves ahead. Fess. And I was very good at winning. Hey. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.